ESPN releases a new top 100 NBA prospects list. Illinois is very well represented.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. So just wanted to give a shout out to my everydayers. I saw you, James, a couple days ago in my comment section. Let me know you're an everydayer. If you tune into this show every single morning, just know I appreciate you. Let me know in the comments and you'll get a shout out on a future episode as well. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me at IlliniCast or at the Sunny V, and also on all the big social media platforms. Just do a search for Locked On Illini. If you'd like to support the channel, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're getting so close to 1,300 subs, which was my goal on YouTube, which I had said a couple weeks ago before the Purdue game started. So let's start the vibes off right before kickoff. Let's hit 1,300 and let's have a 4-touchdown victory in West Lafayette. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I mentioned, Giovanni from ESPN.com released on Wednesday his top 100 NBA prospects for 2025. And there was 4 Illinois Fighting Illini on that list. 2 more, that's right, double up. More than the second best team in the Big Ten. Just to be specific, we had 4 Illinois players, 2 players from Rutgers, 2 players from Michigan, 1 from Maryland, 1 from Oregon, 1 from Indiana, USC and Iowa, and UCLA. Illinois with 4. Now, those of you who tune in, again, I mentioned you everydayers earlier, know that I've said for a while now that I think this is the most talented team we've had in a very long time. More talented than the team that we had last year. These were the 4. Kasparis Jakucionis showed up at number 15 on the list. Will Riley at number 22. Kylan Boswell at 75. And Ben Humrichous at 79. Now, keep in mind, I know firsthand that the staff also thinks that Trey White and Kerry Booth also have potential to be NBA players. Just maybe not in 2025. They might have more of a 2-year window when it comes to playing in the pros. We heard Ty Rodgers and Kylan Boswell at media days also kind of refer to the talent on the team. Ty Rodgers saying, "I'm speaking straight talent-wise here from top to bottom. This team is more talented than we had last year. Last year was one team and a special team. We made it happen. This year, this team is super talented." Boswell mentioned, "I've played on some really good teams, especially this past season, some very good teams. But just off straight talent at every position we have, this is probably one of the most talented teams I've played on for sure." I know that word talent keeps coming up, and that's quite subjective. There's other folks out there who kind of don't agree with the talent label. But I just think, again, it's a simple difference in definition of what that word means. I look at talent as top end. Best case scenario. Terrence Shannon Jr. and Marcus Domask and Coleman Hawkins and Quincy Guerrier were all very, very good college basketball players last year. Only one really has much of an NBA future, and that's Terrence. Coleman tried, but unfortunately didn't get the feedback that he wanted and is now going to be playing in Manhattan for Kansas State. I'm not saying Kasparis Jakucionis is going to be good as an 18-year-old, as Terrence Shannon Jr. was as a 24-year-old. That's clearly not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you talk about the Illini and NBA players, the Illini, we haven't had many NBA players recently. We've had Terrence Shannon Jr. and I would assume all go late in drafts. Kasparis and Will Riley both have potential to be lottery picks next season, depending on how the season goes. And let me ask you guys, some of you may have been watching Illini basketball longer than me. When was the last time that we had 2 players who could be potential NBA lottery picks playing on the same exact team? That is what I define as talent. Here's an example. if I sat myself down next to an NBA scout and with him, I got to watch Kasparis Jakucionis play and showed him footage of Marcus Domask play from last year. And then I told him Kasparis was 18 years old. I gave him basically a background, a foundation of what kind of player he is and his age and length and whatnot. And I showed him Marcus Domask and told him, hey, Marcus is 23 years old. He's at this point in his career, et cetera, et cetera. I am very confident that the scout next to me is going to tell me that Kasparis has the brighter future, that he is the more talented player. He's not going to tell me that Marcus Domask is an inferior college basketball player this season than Kasparis is. Marcus had years to develop to the point where he became an all Big Ten player last year. But that is not my definition of talent. One of the enigmas of this upcoming season is, for me at least, is to watch Kasparis and Will Riley. And just because they're freshmen. With Terrence, you kind of knew what you were going to get. You would hope for a leap, and we got one. And he was, in my opinion, top 2, worst case, top 3 players in the country last year. But with Kasparis, we don't really know. We've seen how he's played over in Europe, and we've seen how he's competed against the top high school talent whenever they come out to play his Barcelona team. But I want to see how his game's going to translate here to America when it comes to college basketball season. And the same goes for Will Riley. We know he's a scorer. We know he can score with anybody in this country. If he had stayed in next year's recruiting class, he was going to be a top 10 player in that class. He obviously reclassified to this season, and so he dropped a little bit. But that's another kid who I want to see what his development is going to ultimately look like, what it's going to ultimately translate to. Because you know what? I trust Brad Underwood, and I trust the coaching staff that we have to develop these kids to reach their potential. And quite honestly, it may just be 1 year. So that's why I say that I don't necessarily think that this is going to be an Elite Eight run for this team. But I don't also want to dismiss the chance that this could be an Elite Eight run type of team as well. I'm going to get into this more in depth, hopefully with Greg Waddle from Sleepers, who kind of has the opposite argument. And please let him know on Twitter that you want him to come on to Locked On. He's already said okay to it. So we might be doing this a little bit later next week and really have this discussion, which, again, I think it ultimately boils down to what talent means. But otherwise, I did want to say just the fact that we have 4 players compared to the next best, which only has 2, is, again, another credit to Brad Underwood and the talent that he's bringing to Champaign. He's elevated us every single year, and this year is no different. We've reached a peak right now, and whether it's a peak or just a matter of where we're at right now, and we're continuing to go higher, we're in good hands. Yeah, we may not have an all Big Ten preseason team player on the roster right now, but that doesn't mean we don't have a high-end roster, and it's proven by lists like Jonathan released on Wednesday. The team is unproven for sure. And is there a chance that this team kind of takes a couple steps back and maybe has a season like the Illini had a couple years ago, the Matthew Meyer team, which in my opinion didn't quite get the chemistry right and ultimately faltered and didn't live up to its potential? That can absolutely happen. And I want to lay that idea with you fans now, that just because things are riding good doesn't mean that you're not going to have seasons where you struggle a bit. But having said that, I also feel very confident that now in seasons where we're going to struggle or maybe not live up to our potential, I think the downside to our seasons moving forward is winning 20 games. And let's be honest, after that decade that we had to deal with at the end of Bruce Weber's tenure and the coach after that, I'll take a minimum of 20 wins every single year and feel good about it. And that's where Brad Underwood has brought us right now. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Let me know what your definition of talented is. Is it aligning with mine? Do you see things in a more practical way on what a player's talent level is that particular day? Or do you project it out for whether it's NBA future? I know some of you aren't NBA watchers and really don't care about what a player looks like professionally and only care about what they look like in the orange and blue. So just let me know one way or the other what you think and whether you think that this and how you would compare the talent level to this roster compared to years past. Speaking of this roster, I've talked about how Brad Underwood has kind of changed his way of recruiting and the type of players that he wants to bring into Champaign. And one of those key factors seems to be length. I think Brad ran into a UConn team last year, which was not just super skillful, not just full of NBA players, but also very tall. Purdue and UConn were considered 1A and 1B when it comes to the two best teams in the country last year. But the difference between the two was that outside Edey, and even that's only barely by a couple inches because Klingon himself was a very tall basketball player, UConn had NBA-sized players at every position. And I think moving forward, I think it makes sense why Brad Underwood would probably want to replicate the same thing. What he's trying to do essentially is build an NBA type roster playing in college basketball. Try to be as positionless as possible because we know what they do now, especially on the offensive end, is start going matchup hunting. To give a little context, Illinois was the tallest team in the Big Ten, at least coming into this year, averaging about 6'7", 0.3 inches tall per player, tied with Purdue. There's 12 teams between 6'6" and 6'6" 3 And by the way, this list is brought together by Joe Jackson from Feed the Post YouTube channel. I brought him up before. He's fantastic, especially if you're trying to learn about the game of basketball, in particular data-wise. There's very few people as good as Joe, and hopefully I'll be having Joe on the show sooner rather than later. Now, an interesting note that Joe had was, and I quote, "I think the interesting thing about Purdue and Illinois is they're the tallest teams in two very different ways. Illinois has two guys listed below 6'6" and only one guy taller than 6'10". Purdue has six guys listed below 6'6" and three guys listed above 6'10". You watch that social media team from the Illini basketball, and all you see is a bunch of guys who look tall and look like they can play in the NBA. And because of this future direction that we're going on the offensive side of the basketball, and Brad Underwood talked about how we would give up 100 points during media days, how badly we're playing defensively. Well, let's be honest. It doesn't look like this Illinois basketball team is going to be very good defensively next season. But if it comes to even close to matching last year's offensive efficiency, where for most of the year we're number one, and I think we finished at number 3, defense isn't really going to matter nearly as much. And one of the best things to offset having a bad, skillfully defensive team is to have length on the court. Length bothers offenses. And when you're able to just switch back and forth from one 6'5" guy to another 6'7" guy guarding the opposition 6'2", 6'3" point guard, it's going to create extra work for the opposition. And it's a strategy that, in my mind, at least, it makes a little sense, especially in particular offensively, of course. When you're going to do that matchup hunting I just mentioned earlier, you want tall guys where you just swap around their positions, and it really doesn't really matter. It's all positionless anyway. On the defensive end is where you're going to get the short end of the stick. Well, no pun intended. But you can still try to make life harder for the opposing team. College football season is well underway, and if you're looking to make your favorite team's home game, please check out the Game Time app. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through the thousands of tickets. Please customize your spot. Use all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And, of course, the lowest price guarantee. Or else the Game Time app will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Brett Bielema earlier this week talked about the importance of NIL when it comes to the Illinois football program. He talked, I believe the numbers he brought up were in the Big Ten, the numbers range from 2 million to 21 million, and that his hopes were that Illinois could constantly remain in the top third. And I think that's a very decent aspiration and one that Illinois fans are capable of reaching for the program. We see how passionate we are on the basketball side. And I've long said that the passion is there on the football side as well. It just hasn't resonated yet because the team has struggled for so long. But Brett, fresh coming off, I believe he's ranked number 19th overall best coaches in a recent poll I saw in a recent poll that I saw this past week. Brett talks about the importance of NIL, and I bring that up because of multiple factors. You want support for the program. It looks like now that Michigan has been announced for the 2:30 slot in 2 weeks, that game is going to sell out, or at the very least be very, very close to selling out. Purdue, this upcoming Saturday, is a very important game. I'd argue as important as the game that we're going to have against Michigan. We're going to be a strong favorite. I think we're a 19-point favorite right now. And last check, we're at about over 50,000 tickets sold, but not really to the point where I think it's going to sell out. And I think that's kind of a shame. Purdue is as close to a natural rival as we're going to get in the Big Ten. Obviously, Northwestern is also in-state, and we have a rivalry with them, but their fan base isn't nearly as passionate as pretty much every other fan base in the Big Ten. And I do think that the rivalry with a school that's only 90 miles away with an equally passionate fan base is just more fun moving forward. Purdue is on its way down right now, and we don't know how our old friend Ryan Walters is going to fare and whether he's going to make it to his third season. By the way, I will have an interview with a Purdue insider in a coming episode where we're going to talk about Purdue a little bit more and just find out where that program is headed. But Brett has talked about how important it is to elevate the financial foundation of the football team. And trust me, you know who knows this more than anybody else? It's Josh Whitman. The landscape of college athletics is changing, and we all want Illinois to be included in the top tier of whichever direction it ultimately decides to go. So I ask you, if you're local to Champaign, unfortunately, I'm not. But if you are, try to make the game. Try to show your support in some sort of way. I'm actually going to try to work on, or at least work with, the people from the NIL, from the Illini side to try to figure out a way if I can partner Locked On Illini with their NIL program, and we can really collectively, collaboratively support our favorite teams moving forward. Because again, I wouldn't do this daily, every single day for a program if I wasn't so passionate about it. And if I didn't want to genuinely see them succeed, not just in football, not just in basketball, but in women's basketball. I want our golf team to win championships. I want our baseball team to win championships. But whether we like it or not, everything starts with football. It's the gateway to the millions of dollars that all these TV networks are offering each individual school. 2030 is the big year. That's when the Big Ten media deal expires and they're going to be trying to make a new one. It also coincides, I believe it's 1 year before the SEC deal expires. And there's been a lot of talk recently about some sort of super conference or where there's just going to be a conference of top 40 teams. I really think that Josh Whitman understands that he has to put Illinois in a path to be considered for that potential super league that might happen down the road. Now, would that be good for college sports altogether? That's a completely different conversation, not worth having right now. I obviously have my opinions. I've made it clear on this show. I've made it clear on Illini Cast. I've made it clear on my other show, Big Ten Show, that I don't like the direction of where college athletics are going. I like the regional stuff. I like the rivalry aspect of the sport, which is slowly going away due to money. But at the same time, if things are going to change, and if I can't control it, and it doesn't look like I can control it, then I at least still want Illinois to be involved in the biggest level, in the most, and at the highest level. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Please, if you're on your way out, hit the like button, subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're watching this on YouTube, find me on your favorite audio platform. Download us from there too. Again, it helps the downloads of this show, which brings more exposure to Locked On Network, who give Illinois more resources to try to continue to help grow this channel. We've surprised everybody. Trust me when I say this. I've had conversations with them. This channel started during the off season, and the fact that we're so close to 1,300 subs already in less than 5 months shows just how passionate this Illini community is. Again, later on, we're going to be talking more in depth about the Purdue game on Saturday, and we're going to have other exciting content for you. Until then, ILL, love you guys.